Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. The Daily News gave it an F. Parents were confused and furious. 5-year-olds were given Metro cards, and the mayor and Chancellor Klein were adamant. The great school bus reroute fiasco. Paradigm or exception in Joel Klein's Department of Education. To talk about the bus reroute fiasco and much more things educational, the mayor's State of the City address, the governor's State of the State speech, and the recent teachers contract is Randi Weingarten, president of the United Federation of Teachers. She also heads the city Municipal Labor Committee, an umbrella organization for some 100 city employee unions representing 365,000 workers. Randi,
Doug.
Welcome. Exciting times.
Well, certainly interesting.
This
Never a dull moment.
Yeah, never a dull moment. School bus rerouting fiasco, total disaster. What does it mean? Is it isolated, or is this symptomatic of the way the system operates here?
The bus issues are symptomatic of the way the system operates. And what's interesting to me is that, thank God, parents finally said, this is ridiculous, because what happened here is that in September, they started sending notices about there would be bus rerouting. And people like Betsy Gottbaum, the public advocate, and Tim Johnson, the head of the Chancellor's Parent Advisory Committee, said, this is insane. What are you doing here? Kids need to get to school. And so this went underground for a while, and then you had the consultants who were making $17 million, basically, I think, needed to show that their work was worth something. So out of nowhere, they rerouted the buses even after these folks complained about it and said, this is insane. And they do it, just so happens, on the coldest week of the year.
And the head of transportation's on vacation.
I mean, you know, look, most of us who work at schools, I'm not begrudging anybody a vacation. There are sometimes, even when schools are in session, that I'll try to take a day or two off. But most of the time, if you're doing something big, you try to be around when that transition happens. And most of us take vacation during school, you know, when schools are off, not when schools are on, if we're schools people. But that's not what the issue is. The issue was that the school system knew that this is insane to change bus routes in the middle of a school year. We just did it last year when we did the 37-minute tutoring periods, and you saw how much they painstakingly tried to deal with it that year. So to do it again the second year in a row, and then to do something where they do the stuff all by the numbers. There's no humanity left at the Board of Ed.
Not educators and parents.
Doug, I have no idea anymore.
Management experts?
There's no educator left except for the Deputy Chancellor at the Board of Education. So I don't know who is doing this. I think it's the consultants who have, but, you know something, in all fairness, you can't blame the consultants. They consult. They don't manage the system. And so but the point is this. You change this in the middle of a school year. The core piece for kids is instruction every single day. That's the core. It's not what happens at Tweed. It's not what happens in a principal's office. It's not what happens with all these restructuring gurus. It is what is going on in a classroom with kids. And so if the effect of this is that children's lives get totally disrupted, parents' lives get totally disrupted. I don't care if it's 3 kids, 10 kids, 1,000 kids, 50,000 kids. You have disrupted a huge number of lives in the middle of January. And what for? To save $6 million? when the city of New York has a $3 billion surplus? So what it says, when I say it's symptomatic, it says people don't get that the school life for a child and for teachers and for parents is September to June. They don't get that you don't disrupt children's lives like this. And when you have this debacle happen, you don't say to parents, oh, it's a first day or second day glitch. It's infuriating to them. And so that's why I'm saying lack of listening, lack of planning, and lack of real core knowledge in your heart and soul about what schools are about.
One of the critiques has been that the Department of Ed, particularly now, as you note, are run by lawyers and management types. There aren't educators there. And that clearly is one of the main problems here, that parents are not involved and the people who are delivering it in the classroom aren't as involved.
Look, Harold Levy was a lawyer. I am a lawyer. I happened to teach for 6 years at Clara Barton High School. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't have solely educators there, but you have to have people who know the schools, not who are business guru types who have no sense of schooling and what kids need and what the adults who teach kids need in terms of support for helping children. And that's what's absent. And what happens is that when anything we say, if we say things that support them, they love it. They trot us out all the time. The moment I ever say something that is critical, then you can just press the button in the computer. Oh, it's the status quo. She doesn't want to change. And one of the things that is really remarkable to me is that the UFT has taken the responsibility of running 2 charter schools. And yet, when we raise issues about schooling, even though we get lauded for doing this, we don't know anything about what the school 2 blocks down the road is about because it's the school system.
Well, the Times put it in their January 28th editorial that they talked about the mayor's habit of ignoring reasonable criticism. And knowing your relationship with Chancellor Klein, I would say that it's probably not what you would call a close one?
No. I mean, look, I was, and it's not a surprise, I was very offended that we got to a collective bargaining contract in November.
And we'll talk about that agreement.
But for example, on the issue of teacher competency, we did something quite historic in the new agreement, that both the mayor and I stood up and said, this is a great way of trying to have a rethinking of the tenure processes. We called it Peer Intervention Plus. And we said, if a teacher is brought up on charges, we want some independent third party that both the union and management to agree can look at the teacher's teaching. So we get rid of cronyism, corruption, incompetence in management. And we both stood up and said that that was very good. Now, you would think, if the management of the school system wanted to even think about how teachers get tenure, they would have raised it with us in October or November, not waited to 24 hours before the mayor's State of the City speech in January. You would think if this was something that they've been thinking about for a while, that it would have been raised with us before.
But they don't consult.
But what I'm saying is
that
here we did a contract in November. Why would you do a contract with us and not raise an issue like this? The truth is, and that's why I was so offended, the truth is what Tweed did was that they used to have an affirmative program for how teachers got tenure. The community school boards used to vote on tenure decisions all the time. So they forgot to put it back in when they did Children's First. So instead of admitting that, instead of saying, oh, we're doing this the same thing that we used to do with one glaring exception, they decide that they want to look like they're getting tough on tenure. That's wrong. The teachers in classrooms are the ones who teach. They're the ones that need to be supported. So instead of talking about all this restructuring, and this is why I applauded Spitzer so much, at least Spitzer said, let's do the programs that work. Let's focus on middle school restructuring. Let's focus on lower class size. Let's focus on pre-kindergarten. Let's focus on career and technical education.
And you gave Spitzer a pass, and you failed Klein. Now, there's really two state of speeches. There's the state of the city speech, where the mayor laid out his education plan and reorganization, and then Governor Spitzer did his state of the state, where he talked about those matters. Talk about the mayor's speech and what he proposed in that speech, particularly the new reorganization, the tenure, the so-called accountability measures. Talk about that and evaluate that for us.
Well, look, what was so remarkable about the two speeches, and this is why I did an op-ed piece in the Daily News this week, is that the mayor's speech was all about structure and accountability from the principal on down. The people who have the least amount of power to effectuate change, other than what comes out of their own head and their own guts. What Spitzer did was say, I'm going to take resources and some instructional programs and tie it together with bottom to top or top to bottom accountability. So Spitzer preached saying, I'm going to walk in here and find money. But you school systems, not just teachers in classrooms, but you school systems are going to take some responsibility here. So what you saw, and I was really disappointed in terms of why the mayor did that, because the mayor, think about it, mayoral control was about the mayor taking responsibility. This new restructuring is about pushing that responsibility onto the shoulders of principals.
And also there seems, as you note, this real focus on structure and process and not on substance, because in fact, if you look at the mayor's State of the City speech, he did not talk about substantive matters like Spitzer did in terms of reducing class size, pre-kindergarten, longer class sessions, days, years. So in Spitzer's, you had substance. Why didn't you hear substance in the mayor's speech?
Well, but I think what's happened is that first I said, where's the instructional piece here? I mean, look, we've done things like longer time, and nobody has done an evaluation to see if even the 37-minute tutoring periods are working or not.
But isn't this whole thing supposed to be about measurement? Aren't they talking about metrics?
Right. So that's what this is what's so poignantly sad about this. This is the third restructuring in 5 years. What happens, there's this old joke in Business School 101 that says, you leave 3 envelopes for your successor. The first is restructure. The second is, we're still working on the restructuring. The third is to give the same 3 envelopes to the next successor. But when people restructure all the time, instead of even trying to figure out what the kinks are in a system, that should be a very big red flag. But look, this is who these folks are. It's not even about process. This is who these folks are. What my concern is this. I represent the people who actually do the work. And what they say to me all the time, and maybe you have to be a classroom teacher for a little while to understand this, is that
having been one, I tend to agree, but go ahead.
That when all these orders come from on high, where people don't know how to walk in our shoes and then don't even listen to us when we say, don't do it this way, do it another way, or the way that I'm teaching my kids, let me have 10 minutes to teach a lesson on the bombing of Hiroshima. Don't tell me I have to do it in 3.5 minutes. Let me be able to engage my class. The fact that the teachers are never listened to about how to do this is enraging to them. So there's actually no process in this new structure. What it is about just devolving responsibility onto the shoulders of the principals, and then the principals either have to say, I can do it or I can't do it, and then the chancellor looks tough. Like, I told this principal to do it, and if he can't do it, he'll be fired. That doesn't help educate children. It can create lots and lots of cheating scandals. It can create lots and lots of pressure. But how does that? Where is the evidence that shows that pedagogical stance of fear-based education has actually educated a child in this century?
The question then becomes, if there is this devolvement of responsibility and a consequent devolvement of power and resources, are the principals, is the structure such that they are able to do what we expect them to do and want them to do? Well, particularly given the fact that you signed a very good contract with the city in November. CSA hasn't signed a contract in 3 years, and it's been pitched battles. They're feuding. How does this happen? How do you devolve responsibilities to people that you've denigrated, bargained with for 3 years? How does this work?
And also, are you really devolving real power to them, or simply responsibility? And what we're starting to see more and more and more is that the responsibility is being devolved without any real commensurate authority. I'll take, for example, the 37. I'll take the 37 minutes, or I'll take things like professional development or curriculum. If you're actually really devolving responsibility and authority, then you would let schools decide how to organize their school day based upon an agreement of the principal and the school community, which our contract allows people to do. And what people have not been allowed to do is that they're not allowed to do that. They're told, for example, that the mayor wants, whether it's true or not, the 37 minutes to always be tutoring, period, at the end. So if you're actually saying to a principal, look, we want you to take responsibility with your staff in terms of designing your structure of the school day, let them then design that structure. Same in terms of professional development. If I hear one more time that the principals have power, but regional person or the Board of Education is requiring them to use Teachers College as the professional development entity, then there's no real power. And you see this over and over again.
So what I'm hearing is, even though the talk is one of devolving responsibility and power, there's an awful lot of micromanaging in the system.
There's still a huge amount of micromanaging in the system, but what's really happening in the system is the law of unintended consequences. So, for example, take issues like safety. Safety is really important. Climate of a school is really important. But principals will tell you privately, if I really report safety incidents, then I'm going to be called on the carpet. And what we see is the one or two people who do report, then they get called on the carpet. So which message should you take? Should you take the message that says report everything? And now the union has a new reporting system. We've seen a 3-4-fold increase in reports that we've gotten. It's created quite the check and balance, but I feel badly for principals who are trying to do the same thing, same in terms of special education kids. I've seen, and so have so many of my members, thousands of kids who do not get the services they need under special education requirements. And often IEPs rewritten, people being scared to death to report this kind of stuff, and principals are telling you that they're going to get called on the carpet if they show an increase or an uptick in terms of kids who need special education. That is the law of unintended consequences. If you really are managing a system well, and you allow principals and staffs to do what is right for children, then you have to let them do what is right for children.
Okay, let's get to some of this reorganization and what it means, because it's a bit confusing. They had originally established these 10 regional superintendents, and there was large questions about the abilities, what they would do, etc. Now, these 10 are gone, and 4 of them remain, and schools have a choice of 3 options: becoming an empowerment school, joining up with an external partner, or become part of one of these 4 learning support organizations. I've read this fairly carefully. Explain this to me. What does this really mean in terms of, again, what's happening in the classroom and what do kids walk out with coming out of that classroom?
We have no, I think you've explained it fairly well with one exception. The state law, which was actually passed in 1996, there was a huge change in state law that said these are the responsibilities of superintendents, who now report directly to a chancellor. These are responsibilities of principals. And it's pretty, and then there will be school leadership teams that help, that are made up
And these
of
school leadership teams are comprised of whom?
parents and teachers and the principal.
Is that happening now? Because there seems
It's
to be...
happened much more in the breach than in reality.
Okay.
But so, and that law basically said that these are the accountability rules for each one of these entities. What's happened is that law was never changed by mayoral control. What mayoral control did was say that the mayor would directly appoint the chancellor as opposed to the Board of Education directly appointing the chancellor. So you have to have, what the mayor initially did was he took several different school boards or school districts and he centralized them and created a central model of 10 regions, which had 10 regional superintendents.
There was somebody who studied with the Romans with these 10s.
Right, who had 10 Liz's report to each of them, and each of the Liz's would have 10 schools report to each of them.
Right.
So that you would have 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, whatever, and that there would be some kind of uniform curriculum. Now, there's lots of problems with that first organization. They forgot about safety, they forgot about a few other things, and the first year the scores were flat, the second year the scores spiked up, last year the scores were flat. So now we have a new reorganization which says get rid of all the regions, but somebody still has to rate officially principals and schools.
Right.
So go back to the community superintendents.
Which they, in a sense, had neutered.
Correct. They will now rate the principals.
So we're back to decentralization
So we're back
again.
to the 32 decentralized school districts and then probably a high school district and District 75. But then they will not give the support to the schools. They'll just rate the schools based upon some unknown set of metrics right now, probably math and literacy scores. And then on top of that, the schools will buy their support from either empowerment, these 4 superintendents, right, or these private entities yet to be described. So all of a sudden in this new structure, you have 2 structures here. So the structural cohesiveness is that the mayor attempted to put into place in his first restructuring is now eviscerated in the second restructuring, and the schools basically are going to have to buy self-services and at the same time report to somebody else. But the real dilemma in this is the funding scheme.
I was going to this weighted student funding. We've got about 5 minutes left. Give me a couple of minutes to explain. What does this mean?
This weighted student funding is the worst idea that I have heard in a really long time.
And you've heard some bad ones, I'm sure.
This is the worst. Not because it says something that it isn't. All of us are in favor of helping the neediest kids. And the record, Chancellor Crew and I did more to turn around low-performing schools than I think anybody else has done in the city of New York in terms of getting resources to low-performing schools and turning around those schools. The issue here is that you cannot take from one to give to another. And what's happened here is that in the guise of wanting to help poor kids, if this happens, they will hugely destabilize schools that work.
How?
Because teacher salaries are now variable. A new teacher makes about $45,000. A senior teacher makes about $100,000 in 2008. Mm-hmm. If they held schools harmless for that variation, then this formula could work. But that's not what they're doing. They are trying to force a school
Count the
have
salaries.
to count the salaries.
As part of their operating
And the
expenses.
moment they do that, they destabilize good schools. It's sophistry to say it's about we want to make sure that there's an equalization in terms of the formula. They can do that in all sorts of other ways, because what's the difference about a good school and a bad school normally? It's not the neighborhood that you're in. The difference is the retention of staff and the turnover. Anytime you see a bad school, you look at the teacher turnover and you see huge turnover. If you see a good school, you're going to see, except for normal retirements, you're going to see very little turnover. You're going to see a place where people want to send their kids and where people want to teach. And so a good school will always have a higher salary cost. And so when they start saying to people, well, this is the difference. Do you want a lower class size or do you want to have an experienced staff? That is a rotten choice. That should not be a choice that this school system, with Spitzer putting $3 billion into it,
and the city
would
putting
give
in more
it
money too.
To schools. Schools should not have to make that choice. That's part of the reason why we keep saying, let's make sure schools have a lower class size so that they have the same resources in terms of class size as anywhere else in the rest of the state.
30
Sorry.
seconds. Well, no, a little screed is very helpful. 30 seconds. You're the chancellor. You're the mayor. What are the first three things you do?
First off, you do the reform that we've never done in this city. You want to increase graduation rates? You want to decrease safety issues? We lower class sizes at least to where they are in the rest of the state.
Okay.
Secondly, we focus like a laser beam on the middle schools. We focus.
There was no mention in that in the mayor's speech, surprisingly.
What's worse is that there was this great report done the day before by this coalition of parents groups, which we participated in. It had some really good concrete
What do you do with the
steps.
middle schools?
What you do is you lower class sizes to 20 in every single class. You focus on the psychosocial development of kids. You focus on ensuring that kids have the guidance needs that they have, but also have something in school that they attach to, whether it's career technical education, whether it's music, whether it's art, and you do those things at the same time.
Third, what else?
The third thing I would do is I would actually do programs that, the third thing I would actually do is I would listen these days to teachers and to parents. They want very badly to make a difference in the lives of children. The mayor has said we have the best qualified teaching staff that we've ever had. If so, listen to them. And the same with parents.
Too bad the time's up. We might have to continue this at a later date. Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thanks a lot.